Papa Samuel sat on his favorite bamboo chair in the family compound, watching the sun set over their quiet village. At 72, his back was bent but his mind remained sharp as a knife. His 5 children had traveled from Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt for what they thought was a simple family visit. David, the eldest at 45, wore an expensive suit. Grace, the only daughter, carried designer handbags. The younger boys, Victor, Michael, and Emmanuel, arrived in flashy cars that made neighbors stare. "My children," Papa Samuel began, his voice still strong despite his age, "I called you here because I have something important to say." They gathered around him, smartphones forgotten for once. "I am getting old. My bones ache every morning. I forget things sometimes. Soon, I will need someone to help me with daily life." The children nodded, expecting him to ask for money or medical bills. "So I want to know, who among you will take care of me now?" The question hit the compound like thunder. Suddenly, nobody wanted to make eye contact. David studied his expensive watch. Grace examined her fingernails. The younger boys found the ground very interesting. Mama Ruth, Papa's wife of 50 years, watched from the kitchen doorway. Then she burst into loud laughter. "Look at them," she called out. "All of you came with fine clothes and big cars, but nobody came with a plan for your father." The real storm was just beginning. Mama Ruth's laughter stung worse than bee stings. The 5 successful children shifted uncomfortably in their plastic chairs, each one hoping someone else would speak first. David, the eldest, finally cleared his throat. "Papa, you know I would love to take care of you. But my wife, she has her own parents to worry about. Our house is small, and with 3 children." "Small house?" Grace interrupted, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Brother, you live in Lekki. Your house has 6 bedrooms." "That's not the point," David shot back. "Marriage has its own challenges." Grace rolled her eyes. "Papa should suffer because of your wife's attitude." Victor jumped in to defend his elder brother. "It's easy for you to talk, Grace. You're not even married. You don't understand family pressure." "Not married?" Grace's voice rose dangerously. "I chose career over marriage to help this family. Don't use my sacrifice against me." Michael, ever the peacemaker, tried to calm things down. "Everyone, let's not fight. We can work out a schedule." "Schedule?" Emmanuel laughed bitterly. "Papa is not a business meeting. He's our father." The arguments grew louder. 20 years of buried resentments bubbled to the surface. Who had sacrificed more? Who had visited home more often? Who truly loved Papa? Papa Samuel sat quietly, sipping his palm wine, watching his children tear each other apart over his future. Suddenly, he gripped his chest and dropped his cup. The clay vessel shattered on the concrete floor. Papa Samuel collapsed forward, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Papa!" All 5 children screamed at once. Chaos erupted in the compound. Grace rushed to check Papa's pulse while David shouted for someone to call a doctor. Victor ran to get water. Michael and Emmanuel lifted Papa's limp body onto a mat. "His heartbeat is weak." Grace cried, her medical training from nursing school finally useful. Neighbors came running. Someone brought palm oil to rub on Papa's chest. Another person suggested local herbs. The village doctor, summoned from his evening meal, arrived with his old medical bag. For 30 terrifying minutes, everyone thought Papa Samuel was dying. Then, his eyes opened slowly. He looked around at his 5 children, all crying, all holding different parts of his body, all terrified of losing him. A weak smile spread across his face. "I am not dying," he said softly. "I only wanted to see if you still cared about your old father." Relief flooded the compound like rainfall after drought. But relief quickly turned to anger. "Papa! David exclaimed. You nearly gave us heart attacks. Why would you scare us like that? Papa Samuel chuckled, sitting up with Victor's help. Because when I asked who would care for me, you all looked at your phones. But when you thought I was dying, you all rushed to help. Grace wiped her tears, understanding dawning on her face. You were testing us. Every parent tests their children, Papa replied. Sometimes we test your honesty. Sometimes your kindness. Today, I tested your love. The children looked ashamed, remembering their earlier arguments. That night, as everyone prepared for bed, Grace noticed something strange. Papa's bedroom light stayed on late, and she could hear him moving around. She peeked through the window and saw him packing clothes into an old bag. What is Papa doing, she wondered. The next morning would bring an answer none of them expected. Dawn broke over the village, but Papa Samuel's room was empty. His bed was made, his walking stick was gone, and only a handwritten note remained on his pillow. Grace found it first and called the others urgently. David read the note aloud. My dear children, if you truly want to care for me, come and find me. Your test is not finished. Papa. Test. Michael scratched his head. What kind of test requires running away? Emmanuel checked Papa's wardrobe. He took his best clothes and his Bible. This was planned. Mama Ruth sat on Papa's bed, shaking her head with a knowing smile. Your father is wiser than all of you put together. This is not ordinary running away. Mama, where could he go? Grace asked desperately. He's 72 years old. That's exactly why this is not ordinary, Mama Ruth replied. Samuel has something to teach you. Something you cannot learn by sitting in this compound. Panic spread through the family. David called his contacts in Lagos, thinking Papa might have boarded a bus to the city. Grace contacted relatives in neighboring villages. The younger boys searched the local markets. But Victor, who had always been closest to Papa, had a different idea. I think Papa wants us to work together, he said. All these years, we've been living separate lives. Maybe he's forcing us to unite in searching for him. Mama Ruth nodded approvingly. That boy has sense. Your father is somewhere safe, but he wants to see if you'll truly care enough to find him together. But where do we start looking? Mama Ruth pointed toward the forest path behind their compound. Start where your hearts lead you. Papa always said the best hiding places are in plain sight. As the 5 siblings prepared to search together for the first time in decades, none of them noticed the fresh footprints leading toward the old family farm. The 5 siblings split into teams, searching every corner of their village. David and Grace went to the market square, asking traders if they had seen Papa Samuel. Victor and Michael headed to the church, hoping Pastor Williams had news. Emmanuel chose the old family farm where Papa had grown yams and cassava for 40 years before retiring. At the farm, Emmanuel found fresh footprints in the red earth. Someone had been walking through the abandoned fields recently. The footprints led toward the forest boundary where Papa used to take them hunting as children. At the church, Pastor Williams shook his head sadly. Your father hasn't been here for 3 days. But he did ask me something strange last Sunday. What did he ask? Victor inquired. He wanted to know if love could be measured by presents or by presents. I didn't understand then, but now. Meanwhile, David and Grace found clues at the market. Mama Uche, who sold vegetables, remembered seeing Papa Samuel walking toward the forest with a young man she didn't recognize. They were talking seriously, she recalled. The young man was carrying Papa's bag like a servant. As the siblings regrouped to share information, they heard something that made their hearts skip, laughter echoing from deep within the forest. Papa's laughter. But it wasn't alone. Children's voices mixed with his, creating a joyful sound that drew them forward like a magnet. Papa is playing with children in the forest. Grace wondered aloud. At his age? David frowned. That doesn't make sense. But the laughter continued, growing louder as they followed the forest path deeper into the green darkness. Following the sound of laughter, the siblings pushed through thick forest vegetation until they reached a small clearing. What they found there stopped them in their tracks. Papa Samuel sat on a fallen tree trunk, surrounded by 8 village children between ages 5 and 12. He was telling stories, using different voices for different characters, making the children giggle with delight. And then the tortoise said to the rabbit. Papa's voice carried the same magic that had captivated his own children decades earlier. The village children hung on his every word, their eyes wide with wonder. They sat as close to him as possible, some leaning against his knees, others holding his hands. "Papa!" Grace called out, rushing into the clearing. The village children scattered like birds, frightened by the sudden appearance of well-dressed strangers. Papa Samuel looked up calmly, as if he had been expecting them. "My children," he said with a peaceful smile. "You found me." "Papa, what are you doing here?" David demanded. "We've been searching everywhere. Do you know how worried we were?" "Were you worried about me," Papa asked gently, "or worried about what people would say if you lost your father?" The question hit like a slap. "These village children," Papa continued, gesturing to where the kids had been sitting, "they visit me every day. They listen to my stories. They laugh at my jokes. They remind me of you when you were small and still loved your old father." Grace felt tears building. "Papa, we still love you. Do you?" Papa stood up slowly. "When last did any of you visit just to talk? When did you last ask about my dreams, my fears, my memories?" The silence was deafening. Crack! A loud branch snapped somewhere behind them. Someone else was in the forest, watching their family drama unfold. The siblings spun around, but saw only shadows moving between the trees. "Who's there?" Victor called out. A young man stepped into the clearing, and Papa Samuel's face lit up with genuine joy. The young man was tall and lean, about 25 years old, with calloused hands and kind eyes. He wore simple clothes but carried himself with quiet confidence. "Good evening, Papa Samuel," he said, bowing respectfully. "I brought the medicine you asked for." Papa Samuel's face glowed with warmth. "Children, meet Timothy. He is like a son to me." The 5 siblings exchanged confused glances. Who was this stranger claiming their father's affection? "Papa, who is this person?" David asked suspiciously. Timothy answered calmly, "I work at the pharmacy in town. For 3 years now, I've been bringing Papa Samuel his medicines, helping him with small tasks around the compound. Sometimes I just sit and listen to his stories." 3 years. Grace's voice cracked. "Papa, why didn't you tell us you needed help?" "I called each of you many times," Papa replied sadly. "David, you always said you were busy with work. Grace, you were traveling for business. Victor, Michael, Emmanuel. Always something more important than visiting your old father." Timothy stepped forward respectfully. "Uncle Samuel, since your children don't want to take care of you, let me be the son they refuse to be. My own father died when I was young. You've been like a father to me." The words hit the siblings like physical blows. This stranger had been caring for their father while they pursued wealth and success in distant cities. "You taught me how to be a man," Timothy continued. "Let me repay that kindness. I'll quit my job and care for you full-time." Papa Samuel smiled with genuine affection. "Timothy, my boy, you understand something my own children forgot." "What's that, Papa?" "Blood is thicker than water. But kindness is thicker than blood." The 5 siblings felt shame burning in their hearts. They had been ready to abandon their father, and now a stranger was offering to replace them entirely. "No!" Grace suddenly declared. "Papa, we won't let you down again." But Papa Samuel had heard such promises before. The next morning, Papa's compound looked like a construction site. David arrived with builders to construct a new house. Grace brought doctors for a complete medical checkup. Victor purchased the biggest radio in the electronics shop. Michael hired a maid to cook Papa's meals. Emmanuel bought a generator to ensure constant electricity. "Look, Papa," David announced proudly. "Your new house will have 3 bedrooms, modern bathroom, and tiled floors. See this radio, Papa?" Victor beamed. It receives stations from London and America. Grace presented bottles of expensive vitamins. "These will keep you healthy for 20 more years." Papa Samuel watched the chaos with amusement. His children were spending money like water, each trying to outdo the others. But Mama Ruth frowned from her kitchen window. "This is not care," she muttered to herself. "This is competition." Timothy continued his quiet service, bringing Papa's morning tea, reading newspapers to him, listening to his stories about the old days. "Uncle Samuel," Timothy said softly, "your children love you very much." "Do they love me?" Papa wondered, "or do they love the idea of being good children?" That afternoon, while the siblings argued about renovation plans, Papa Samuel felt dizzy. He tried to stand but stumbled backward. This time, his collapse was real. Timothy caught him just before he hit the ground, but Papa's breathing was labored and his skin had turned pale. "Call the doctor," Timothy shouted. "Papa Samuel is really sick." The building materials, expensive radio, and fancy vitamins suddenly seemed meaningless. Their father was dying, and all their money couldn't buy back the time they had wasted. At the general hospital, Papa Samuel lay connected to machines that beeped steadily, monitoring his weak heartbeat. The doctor, a young woman named Dr. Hope, examined his chart with concern. "Your father is exhausted," she explained to the gathered family. "His body is weak, but more importantly, his spirit is tired." "What do you mean?" David asked. "He needs medicine, yes. But he also needs something else. He needs presence. Companionship. People who care about him as a person, not just as a responsibility." The siblings took turns sitting beside Papa's bed, but their visits felt forced and awkward. They didn't know what to say to the man who had raised them. David talked about his business. Grace discussed her career achievements. The younger boys shared news about their cars and houses. But Timothy simply sat quietly, holding Papa's hand, humming old songs they both remembered. Grace watched Timothy's gentle care and felt ashamed. This stranger knew their father's favorite foods, his preferred sleeping position, the stories that made him smile. "I should know these things," she whispered to herself. "I'm his daughter." One by one, the siblings began to cry, not from fear of losing Papa, but from realizing how little they truly knew about the man who had given them everything. Papa Samuel's eyes opened slowly. His gaze moved across his children's faces, then settled on Timothy. "Now I know," he whispered weakly, "who truly cares about an old man's heart." The words pierced deeper than any blade. "Papa, please don't say that," Emmanuel pleaded. "We all love you." Papa Samuel smiled sadly. "Love is not what you say, my son. Love is what you do when nobody is watching." As Papa Samuel's strength slowly returned over the next 3 days, he made a decision that would change everything. He called his children to gather around his hospital bed, his voice serious and clear. "I have been thinking," he began, "about my house, my land, and the small money I saved from my teaching salary." The siblings leaned forward, suddenly very attentive. "Timothy," Papa said, turning to the young man who had barely left his bedside, "you have shown me more care in 3 years than my own children showed in 3 decades. Timothy shook his head humbly. "Papa Samuel, I only did what felt right. And that is exactly why," Papa continued, reaching for a pen and paper from his bedside table, "I have decided to make you my heir." The room exploded with shock. Grace grabbed the edge of the bed. David's mouth fell open. The younger boys looked like they had been struck by lightning. "Papa, you can't be serious," Michael protested. "I am completely serious," Papa replied, his pen hovering over the inheritance documents. "This young man has proven that blood alone does not make family. Care makes family. Love makes family. Presence makes family." Mama Ruth entered the room carrying Papa's favorite soup. She had heard everything from the hallway. "Samuel," she said quietly, "are you sure about this decision?" Papa Samuel looked at each of his children one more time. They had 45 years to show they cared. Timothy needed only 3. He began to sign the papers, his handwriting shaky but determined. "Wait!" Grace screamed. "Papa, please. Give us another chance." But Papa's pen was already moving across the paper, transferring a lifetime of work to the stranger who had become the son they refused to be. David lunged forward and grabbed the pen from Papa's hand. "Papa, you can't do this. We're your blood. You're real children." Grace snatched the inheritance papers, tearing them before anyone could stop her. "This is madness. You want to give everything to a stranger?" The hospital room turned into a battlefield. Michael and Emmanuel blocked Timothy from reaching Papa. Victor shouted about family rights and legal inheritance laws. "Security," a nurse called from the hallway. "We need security in room 12. Hospital staff rushed in to find 5 well-dressed adults fighting over papers while their elderly father watched in heartbreak. "All of you, get out," Dr. Hope commanded. "This patient needs rest, not drama." But the siblings ignored her, continuing their desperate argument. "You're killing Papa with your noise." Mama Ruth screamed, her patience finally broken. "Will you let greed bury your father alive?" Her words cut through the chaos like a sword. Everyone stopped fighting and looked at Papa Samuel. His face was pale, his breathing labored again. The stress was literally killing him. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Tears dropped onto the hospital floor as each child realized what their selfishness was doing to the man they claimed to love. Papa Samuel raised his weak hand and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Tomorrow. I will make my final decision. Tonight, let me rest." The word "final" sent chills through everyone's heart. Would Papa survive the night? And if he did, would he still choose Timothy over his own children? The siblings spent that night in the hospital corridor, praying and planning, knowing tomorrow would change their family forever. As the first morning light entered Papa Samuel's hospital room, his children gathered around his bed with faces full of regret and hope. Timothy stood respectfully at the back, ready to accept whatever Papa decided. Papa Samuel's voice was stronger than the night before, but his words carried the weight of a lifetime's wisdom. "My children," he began, "yesterday you showed me exactly what I feared most. You fought over my inheritance before I was even dead." The siblings hung their heads in shame. "But you also showed me something else. When you thought you were losing me forever, you forgot about money and remembered love." Papa sat up slowly, Mama Ruth helping him adjust his pillows. "So here is my decision. It is not about money, not about houses, not about radios or generators. Care is about presence, not presence." He looked each child in the eye. "From today, all of you will take turns living with me. 1 month each. David, then Grace, then Victor, then Michael, then Emmanuel. You will learn who your father really is, not just the man who gave you school fees." Timothy smiled and bowed. "Papa Samuel, this is wisdom. I am happy for your family. And Timothy," Papa continued, "you will always be welcome in our home. You have shown me that family is not only about blood, but about love in action." The siblings looked at each other, understanding finally dawning. Papa hadn't wanted to punish them, he had wanted to save them from becoming strangers to each other. "Papa," Grace said, taking his weathered hand, "we promise to do better. All of us. Together, David added, meaning it for the first time. Papa Samuel smiled, his eyes twinkling with the mischief that had made him a beloved teacher for 40 years. Now, he said with growing strength, let me rest. Caring for 5 stubborn children is hard work, even for a father. As Papa closed his eyes peacefully, his children finally understood that this rest was not the beginning of his final journey, it was the start of their journey back to being a real family. The test was over. Love had won. This folktale teaches us that, family is not proven by wealth or loud promises, but by presence, sacrifice, and genuine love. When our elders age, they do not need competition among their children, they need unity, laughter, and most importantly, time. To neglect our parents is to neglect the very roots that helped us grow tall and strong. They gave us their youth, their dreams, and their best years. The least we can give them is our attention, our respect, and our care when they need it most. Papa Samuel's test revealed a truth many families learn too late: our parents don't want our money as much as they want our time. They don't need expensive gifts as much as they need genuine conversation and shared memories. For students watching this story, honor your parents while they are still here to receive that honor. For parents, remember that the love you show your own parents teaches your children how to love you in the future. For educators, like Papa Samuel, you have the power to teach life lessons that books cannot contain. The greatest inheritance parents can leave is not money in the bank, but children who understand the value of family, the importance of caring for each other, and the wisdom that comes from listening to those who walked the path before us. Remember, when our parents grow old, caring for them is not a burden, it is a privilege and an opportunity to repay the love that shaped us into who we are today. I have some questions for you. 1. If you were one of Papa's children, how would you prove you care? 2. Should care for parents be shared equally among siblings, or given to the most capable? 3. What lesson about family unity stands out most to you in this story? 4. If Papa truly died at the end, what would his children regret most? Drop your answers in the comments section, let's hear your thoughts.